think you agree with me that if this is going to have any chance, Vladimir Putin has to understand that there are serious consequences and Trump will follow through on them if he doesn't make a deal in good faith and negotiate. If you were advising Trump, how would you make sure that Putin understands that Trump is serious?
Well, I think Trump has made the threats about increased tariffs on Russia and secondary sanctions pretty clear before, so he can repeat them. The question is whether Putin believes them. The number of extensions of various deadlines call it into question. The fact that Trump did impose a 25% increase in India's tariff could be, in a sense, evidence that Trump's serious. But on the other hand, inexplicably, he did nothing with respect to China. And I can tell you in India, they are incandescent about the way they've been treated. And there are all kinds of visits going back and forth. There's talk of Putin coming to India before the end of the year. Prime Minister Modi of India going to China for the first time since 2018. So Putin may well think that the threat isn't really going to deter these two countries, at least, from continuing to purchase Russian oil and gas. I don't think that's what Putin's mostly worried about. I think what he's worried about is reeling Trump back in, that he felt that he had manipulated him successfully in much of the first term and for the first 6 months of the second term. But he clearly knows now he punched through the envelope and irritated Trump, which has brought us to the present place. So Putin's job and what he will focus on from the minute he and Trump lay eyes on each other is how he's going to convince Trump that once again they're Donald and Vladimir old friends.
Okay. You seem skeptical that Trump will see this for what it is, based on what you've said in the past, and basically said that Trump, you think, is going to get played. 400,000 dead on the Ukrainian side, 1 million dead, 1 million casualties on the Russian side. What is the better plan than talking to Vladimir Putin that you seem to think is a bad idea?
Well, there's a time and a place for conversations between the leaders, and this is not it. You know, Trump has said, I'm not going to negotiate land rearrangements with Putin, although last Friday that's exactly what he was talking about, land swaps that would implicate the Ukrainian constitution. But, you know, in diplomacy, there are all kinds of ways to talk. You can negotiate, which Trump says he's not going to do, or you can have what we call an exchange of views. You know how amazingly close those two things can be? I think Putin is going to try hard to explain to Trump what his quote-unquote peace plan is. I'm sure it's 100% favorable to Russia, but he's going to try and engage Trump. He's going to try and get him to say, you know, that's a fairly reasonable position. Or if Trump wants to make a change, Putin will try and accommodate him if it's not that serious. He'd like to make Trump back into his friend or even his advocate if he could.
Well, sure, if he could. Donald Trump has sort of had some choice words lately for you. Very unfair media is at work on my meeting with Putin, constantly quoting fired losers and really dumb people like John Bolton, who just said that even though the meeting is on American soil, Putin has already won. What's that all about? We are winning on everything. You yourself just said that Trump saw Putin for what he is, and Putin has realized that he has ended his patience quota with Donald Trump and is now coming to try and make friends. Having the guy you're negotiating with coming to you to try and make up is a pretty good place for Donald Trump to be in, right?
I don't think so, because I think Donald Trump is uniquely vulnerable to the kind of manipulation that Putin's KGB training will enable him to deploy. For example, within about 6 months of the inauguration, Putin picked up on what Trump had said repeatedly during the campaign and has said again as recently as this week. This is Biden's war. If I had been president, it never would have happened. A reporter in Moscow asked Putin what he thought of that Trump comment, and Putin said, I think President Trump is right. If he had been president, there never would have been a war. That's how he plays on Trump, and it has worked in the past. It worked in the first term. We'll see. I think it's a win for Putin to be on American territory. He's an international pariah. He's led a rogue state in committing unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. He's been shunned by foreign leaders ever since, and now he's coming to an American Air Force base to stand in the spotlight with the President of the United States.
Yeah, look, I guess, again, I would go back to, you clearly don't like Donald Trump's plan. What's your plan?
I think the plan is, which we should have done 3.5 years ago, is get a strategy for Ukraine to prevail militarily. Donald Trump has called this war senseless. A couple weeks ago, he called it ridiculous. Look at it from the perspective of the Ukrainians. They're fighting for their freedom and independence. Do you believe that's senseless and ridiculous? Okay? The Russians are fighting for the Russian Empire.
We've said this. Right. No, I think that you can say that it is senseless, that it is going on.
Listen for a second.
No, but
if you think it's a ridiculous war, how are you going to communicate to two leaders who both think it's in their national interest? They don't think it's senseless and ridiculous. It shows that Trump doesn't grasp the significance of the issues that divide these two countries. And if you don't get that, fashioning a ceasefire, let alone a resolution of the conflict, is very hard.
I would contend he was using those words in different ways, but I do feel the need to play this for you because Bill O'Reilly on his program went after you very hard on your criticism of Donald Trump. Take a listen.
I'll debate him anytime, any place. The man has nothing, not one thing. If we're up to him, this will continue ad infinitum. And he hates Trump's guts. He hates him. He doesn't want him to succeed. He'd rather have death and destruction in Ukraine than for Donald Trump to succeed.
Is Bill O'Reilly on to something that you have it out for Donald Trump?
Look, I do my best, and I'm sure I fail, to talk about the merits of the policies and to say what I think is right with them and what I think is wrong with them. I'm not going to debate Bill O'Reilly. I'm not going to get down in the gutter with him. I'm sorry to see that kind of performance from him, actually. But I have made critiques of what I think Trump is doing wrong as a matter of policy. People are perfectly free to disagree with that, but argue with me on the merits of the policy.
Okay. To be fair, though, and I'll ask this, when have you come out and praised Donald Trump? That would go a long way, don't you think?
Well, I talk mostly about national security policy. I'm rarely asked about his domestic policies. I think many of his economic policies are correct. They're standard Republican fare. I think in terms of the culture war, I'm largely in agreement. But I certainly don't agree with his interferences in the marketplace, coming up with 15% taxes on NVIDIA's exports. I have said I think Trump did the right thing to attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. I think he cut it off too short. I'd be willing for people to take the hundreds of op-eds I've written since I left the administration in 2019, take them all, read them all, and see if they're attacks on Trump personally or if they're discussions of his policy.
Well, you have always been policy-based in our discussions. I will give you that. Mr. Ambassador, along with you are an equal curmudgeon to all sides, which I admire, and it's one of the reasons we keep having you back. It's good to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me.